Yes, I absolutely do. I don't believe they should have ever closed based on the actual science and stuff that I've seen and what I know about. I mean, I have a background in alternative health and natural health, and I see no reason schools shouldn't open. But there's other reasons for that, and I don't know how deep you want to go into it. But I am in favor of schools back to normal and human life back to normal.
I think it ought to be left to the local communities and the school districts to determine whether or not they need to open. I am hearing from many parents who are concerned that their children's mental health and well-being is being tested now to a certain degree, and so I would be supportive of the local entities making those decisions. That the best government, we hear this all the time, the best government is closest to the people. The school board members, the teachers, they're in the grocery stores and they're running into parents and students, and yes, they have their ear to the ground, and that ought to not to be a decision made at the federal level.
With this, I basically take it up to health professionals to say, like, my impulse based on if it continues to rise is that we should keep kids safe at home, like rather than having them wearing masks, and still, like, most kids don't actually have very good hygiene, and so the thought of trying to mitigate it once they're in school seems much more difficult than keeping them at home. I understand that's hard for parents and we gotta figure out how to deal with all of that. But I think I kind of would need to look at all the data that health experts are looking at and would take their recommendation, but right now I'm pretty apprehensive. I know I teach at a university, and I think online, at least for many or as an option, is good.
Absolutely, our schools have to open this fall. Look, I'm a physician. Every day I have to weigh the benefits versus the risk of any type of treatment plan. So look, the benefits of having students not go to school are very minimal. That this COVID virus has just a small impact on children, but the risk of our kids not going to school is just huge. So think about the problems that happens if kids don't go to school. So many children depend upon the schools for their one good meal each day. I think about some other childhood issues like child abuse and how our schools pick up problems like that. Not going to school is going to create huge mental illness for our students, as well as just putting them behind in the education. Beyond that, the schools play a very, very important part to our economy. So whether you're a nurse or you're a business person, so often that if you have kids that aren't in school, then how are you going to do your job as well? So look, we're so fortunate that this virus does not impact children very, very much unless they have an underlying illness. So there is a safe and responsible way for our schools to get it back and open this fall. We have to do it.
Yes, I do. For the simple reason, children need it. They need the socialization, because that's part of what's wrong with our world today. They don't have the socialization. There are certain instances to where a child, their parents would want them to do the virtual. Okay, now if your child had a chronic illness to where this coronavirus is going to impact them largely, then they should be able to do that. So I think schools should be open. I mean, everybody's afraid of this corona, and they have a right to be, but the kids need a good education.
Well, first of all, I think getting, my belief in government, whether it's local government or federal government, state, or however, is to protect the vulnerable and at-risk populations. And this pandemic, there are people who are vulnerable and at risk for this. The more underlying conditions they have, as we've all heard that term, are the elderly. And I think we ought to do everything we can to make sure that they're protected and isolated so that they're not exposed to this virus. I think as far as the rural communities, they're more isolated, and I think that they are capable of, so long as we do the things that we need to do on a national basis, including protecting our borders, making sure who's coming in and who's leaving, and that's an important thing for the rural areas. But as it relates directly to your question, there are many other ways that we need to support our agricultural business, because I believe that our food source is a national security issue. We survive here on food and air and water, and that's one of the top three things that we need to have, or we're not going to survive very long. And this part of the country, in particular, the state of Kansas, well, and Missouri too, is the breadbasket of the world.
I think we need to really make sure we're there for our farmers and business owners so that we do not open up our economy to tons of foreclosed housing, empty businesses, and farmers who are out, because that doesn't serve anyone's interests. And so part of the issue we need to focus on is, how do we actually support local people? So the current stimulus plan, first of all, it's a bit complicated, and it went through the banking sector to screen who gets the money. And the problem with that is their job is to find creditworthy borrowers. And if you're a small business, just started one up, you don't have a bunch of money sitting around, and so you're riskier. But during this pandemic, we should have as many people able to survive in the meantime. And so what happens so far is franchises and mid-sized companies who can pay people to go through the paperwork and who are less risky, they've been getting the large portion of all of these funds. And we need to make sure that we don't have another crisis like the last one, where big corporations gobble up all of the little guys and have a more unequal economy at the end of this. So what we do, first of all, take away some of the difficult process and screening process, have a direct support to businesses so we can save as many as possible, and then we can fix some of the distributional problems on the back end with effective tax policy. So if it seems bad for Jeff Bezos to accidentally get some stimulus money, it's like, well, we should actually be charging him taxes for being a hundreds of billionaires. So I basically think we need to act decisively to offer financial support and then protections for average people so they have money to spend and support businesses that are operating. That anytime there's a crisis, instead of everyone having to sit around on our hands doing nothing, we can have local administration where a community decides what are the things we want to prioritize to get done, because there's always work to be done even if there aren't enough jobs to go around. And so having the resources put to support local decision making, put people to work in the meantime, and then as the economy picks back up, people can be bid back out into the private sector. And so that will also help us do some of the things like fitting businesses and public spaces for safety for COVID, and providing some of the other work on infrastructure and things that we desperately need done to our economy in the meantime.
I've been working hard since January the 28th, when I was the first member of Congress, to stand up on the House floor and say, look, we have a problem with this virus right now. So what I've worked hard on is something like the Paycheck Protection Program. Right now, that particular program has saved 400,000 Kansas jobs. With agriculture, more specifically, we worked with them getting the Paycheck Protection Program, as well as some other direct financing as well. And one of the big things I did was help keep the packing plants in Southwest Kansas open as well. But beyond that, what I've tried to do is make sure that employers have what they need to make sure that their employees and their customers are safe by making sure that Kansas has plenty of PPE as well as testing. So I've been working on this since January, and I'm going to keep doing the same.
You know, I think a stimulus package addressed to the farmers and small businesses would help if it was directed to the ones that needed it, not the big corporations. Okay. There's so much in the last one that they did. I say we, but the government did. There was so much pork put into it that it didn't go to the right people. I know small businesses here in town that applied and got denied, while some of the larger businesses had 2,000 or 3,000 people, they got the money. So there's got to be a system in place to where the right people get what they need. And so I'm in favor for another stimulus. I think President Trump did right by that. And if it's done the correct way, then, like I said, the right people will get the allotments that they need.
He wouldn't take office until January, so there'll be a lot of information that comes out in the next 6 months before that happens. And but I come from a family of farmers on both sides of my family tree. Western Kansas, northwestern Kansas wheat farmers. I have a ton of friends and supporters for this campaign that are current farmers, and lots of families. So I will reach out to them as their true representative, because that's what we call them elected leaders, but we're really elected representatives of the people. And especially as a senator, you're one of 100, one of 2 for the state. And I look at myself as to be a knight, someone to defend the Constitution and in that defend the rights of the people to their freedoms. So we will do whatever it takes. And like I said, my own father's successful Wagyu beef farmer, as well as one of the top greyhound racing breeders in the world. So I've had a lot of access to farmers and what they believe, and we'll get something. We'll come to a consensus of what needs to be done, and we'll work towards that. It just comes down to that. I believe COVID-19 is actually a grand global conspiracy and hoax. There are so many names that I could name. What I call the global health mafia. Names like Fauci, Birx, Dr. Robert Redfield, Jeremy Farrar, Victor Zhao. The list goes on and on. I've done a lot of research, and but mostly I've found the research of other people who this is their obsession. What we call whistleblowers or truthers or whatever. But the truth is, they're concerned citizens, whether they be American or Canadian. Everybody's been affected by this. Least of all Sweden, least of all South Dakota. Based on the leadership that they have. But it hasn't been good for anybody. I mean, we could go through the history of every pandemic. Since 1918, since 1917, with what they called the Spanish flu, and there were other factors there, but they never shut down anything. They never locked down anything. We've never quarantined the healthy in the history of the free world. Quarantine is for sick people, and they were shutting down businesses, shutting down churches, while allowing their allies on the left to stay open and profit greatly. The billionaires in this country profited $583 billion in the last 4 months. Their wealth increased $583 billion in the last 4 months, and I see a problem with that, because so millions and business owners, common folks, servers, hairdressers. I could go down the list. So it's this has been one of the greatest mistakes, if not the greatest mistake in the history of humanity, that was done directly by government in a short time to its citizens.